Jim Garvey served as an air crewman in B-24s over Europe during World War II. He was born May 20th, 1920, and grew up in Tracy, Minnesota. He joined the Army Air Corps in May of 1942 and immediately entered basic training, followed by radio school. He then attended aerial gunnery school at Harlingen, Texas. He was sent to the B-24 base at Shipdham, England, in May of 1943. There, he joined a bomber crew and began a tour of missions over the continent. In the hour that follows, you will discover that Mr. Garvey is not only a decorated airman and successful businessman, but an accomplished storyteller as well. He tells us of being shot down twice, once by the Germans and once by a combination of mechanical failure and friendly fire. One of these episodes ends with a ditching in the channel and the loss of some of his crewmates, and the other with a bailout over the English countryside. This latter incident came to a rather interesting conclusion when the crewless B-24 recovered from a runaway prop and virtually landed on its own. This last story, and others, can be read in detail by pausing the DVD as the newspaper articles appear on your screen.
The following interview is being conducted at the Fargo Air Museum on the 21st of August 2007 in conjunction with the Veterans Oral History Project. The interviewers are Bob Miller and myself, Tom Asplin, and the subject person is Jim Garvey, a veteran of World War II. Good afternoon, Jim, and welcome.
Thank you.
Can you give us your full name, please?
James Garvey,
And date of birth?
May 20, 1920,
And you are,
87 years.
where were you born?
I was born in Tracy, Minnesota, down the southwest corner, Minnesota.
And who were your parents?
James and Nona Garvey.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
One brother, Keith, and two sisters, Kathleen and Virginia.
Were any of those involved in the military?
My brother was killed in the Battle of the Bulge.
When did you enter military service?
May 4th, 1942.
And where were you inducted?
I was inducted in Montevideo, Minnesota. I was living at Alexandria, but I was inducted at Montevideo.
And what branch of military?
In the U.S. Army Air Corps.
You went in the Air Corps, or did you start in the Army and then converted over to the Air Corps? Or went right into the Air Corps?
I can't tell you
Okay.
how that worked. It went into the Army, and then I guess they just take you, they pick and choose.
Where did you take your basic training?
I took my basic training in Scott and I can't remember the name of the basic training place, but it was in St. Louis. And then my radio training was in Scottsfield, Illinois, just across the river from St. Louis.
And do you recall when these trainings took place?
Yes, I can't tell you the exact date, but it was pretty close to my entry into the service. I would imagine it was June 1st, and it lasted until September.
That was your basic training. Did you have some additional training after that?
My basic training was only about a week. I was telling you about my radio training.
Do you recall?
Did I have any additional training? Yes, a gunnery, of course, at Harlingen, Texas.
Do you recall how long that took place, approximately?
Harlingen was 1 month. Then we went on to unit, and I had 3 units. Each one, you had certain projects that you had to accomplish. And the first one was at the first one was at Clovis Field in Tucson. Next one was in Phoenix, and the last one was El Magardo, New Mexico. In those, you flew certain missions, and you learned a lot of things from aircraft maintenance and running the radio to navigating, triangulating your radio signals.
You had training in gunnery and radio,
Yes.
and ended up at what level? Or
As a radio operator, and wound up as a staff sergeant. And just before we were going overseas, I became a tech sergeant. And I went overseas on May 28th. And the reason I remember that was my grandmother's birthday.
during this time or any time while in the military, did you serve with any friends or hometown?
Well, I was telling you about Larry Nema, in which I had that picture of him and that I gave you. Larry Nema was a former owner of the Royal Jewelers for quite a number of years, and I had never met him before, and I met him then. But no, other than that, I never served. As soon as you get in there, well, you break up in there, and you go your separate ways. And I wound up in the Army Air Corps, and other ones went infantry, the other ones went, I don't know where.
Do you remember what your pay was at that time?
The first pay was $21 a month. Then I got a raise after a couple of months to $50, and it remained $50 until I became a staff sergeant, and that seemed to me it was right around $100. It was an amazing jump. And then it went from there to about 140, and then of course with the flight pay, which was 50% additional, and brought it over 200, and which was incredible amount of money.
Apparently you saw overseas duty then?
Yes, as I said before, I went overseas on May 28th of 1943.
Now, how long were you overseas?
I was overseas until October of 44, or the 1st of November of 1944.
Now, where were you stationed?
I was stationed at a town called Shipton, Shipdam, in Norfolk County, up in the northeastern part of England.
Now, while you were serving there, what aircraft were you flying?
B-24. That's the predominant plane in the Air Corps, but however, the B-17 got the most publicity. The B-17 got there before the B-24, and but the B-24, well, they quit making 17s, and they turned all the everything, all manufacturing muscle into making 24s because they could carry more load at a greater distance.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that B-24, the makeup, the engines, the personnel and armament?
I had 4 Pratt & Whitney engines. I forget the horsepower now. And the crew complement was pilot and co-pilot. And down in the front, in the cage, the bombardier and the navigator. And in the rear, well, in the flight deck was the engineer and the radio operator. In the rear was 4 gunners, the rear tail gunner and 2 waist gunners. Later models had a ball turret gunner, but the total crew was 10 members.
What was the mission for the B-24 when you were with them?
Well, we had to. We never knew where they were going. I was on one mission that was over Regensburg, and we caught a tailwind, and we got down there a lot faster than we thought we should. And if you can imagine 40 B-24 bombers, and I looked down on the ground, and everybody who down there was happy, and they were going to work. They didn't pay any attention to us. It was quite early in the morning. And we dropped some bombs there, and turned out that it was, instead of Regensburg, it was a town in Switzerland, a pretty good sized town in Switzerland. And and we just bombed the daylights out of that town. And I just, for the interest of this, and you know, your interest is piqued, and also your memory is piqued. I read in the paper that the United States government paid $8,000 for that mishap. Now, can you imagine that happening today? And it would be bombing a neutral country, well, we would be billions of dollars, you know, today. But it was $8,000.
All 24 bombers were involved with that?
I believe every one was involved. I don't believe that anybody got out of the formation. Once the leader prescribes a formation and prescribes the target, you follow the leader. And you're pretty busy. Those that are behind the leader is flying in formation. Formation, of course, was in order to get the maximum gun power. So the formation was stepped down. The leader was up high, and then his wingmen were back down a little lower, and subsequently every group until you got what we call the tail end Charlie, way down at the end. And in the most vulnerable spot.
Do you recall any special missions that you'd like to relate to?
I was on the first mission to Berlin, and Berlin, we met a lot of resistance. there was a lot of, on the IP, the initial point, we got a tremendous amount of flak, and we got over the target, and we ran into every airplane that the Luftwaffe had, I think. It was a lot of resistance. And we lost quite a few airplanes that day. The toughest mission that I was ever on was Munich. Munich was my a suburb of Munich, I can't remember now, and we attacked that from Africa. We were down in Africa, and we came in, attacked that, and we got a tremendous amount of flak for a long ways before we got to the target. And then over the target, we just got all kinds of enemy aircraft after us. And I looked ahead, and we had two 400-gallon tanks of gasoline in the front, bomb bays. So needless to say, we just opened the rear bomb bay doors. And the radio operator's job is to go down there and open the bomb bay doors. And he starts out a little machine like we have on our lawnmowers here. And we call it a putt-putt, a little Briggs and Stratton motor, which lifted the bomb bay door. It gave us enough energy to lift the bomb bay doors. And as we went over this target, and it was, as I said before, it was hotly contested, I saw friends of mine bailing out on fire with that they had punctured these gasoline tanks and squirted gasoline, and then they caught fire, and they were bailing out. And the guys that I had just been at the briefing session with, and were good friends of mine, and here they were on fire going out. It was a deadly mission.
On these missions, did you ever have any fighter support or?
Yeah, initially we had fighter support just over just over the English coast. Just got us launched out over the English Channel, and then they left us. That was the best. That was Spitfires, the English. And then as we began to get airplanes up there, starting with the P-39, and then going to the P-51s and the P-38s, and then the P-47s came on a little later. Most of the latter could get us across over the enemy coast, but that was about the extent of their fire, of their ability. They were limited because of their fuel, and of course also the amount of ammunition would weigh them down too.
Do you have any additional missions that you'd like to refer to?
No, I can't refer. None stick out in my mind.
How about when you got shot down?
Well, that was Munich 1, and that was, we got shot down we got shot up over the target. First of all, we had, and we lost an engine as we got off of the target. hotly contested too. But what was interesting about that was all the way along going home, we were constantly losing altitude because we lose one engine after another. And we were continuously getting attacked. And finally, we were at ground level, and what we thought we were in trouble when we left the target, and Munich isn't very far away from the Swiss border, and so here's all the guys in the back, let's go to Switzerland. But the pilot had other ideas. He thought he could get that kite home. And so as we went along, we would lose engines, and finally we lost the last. And here's the pilot and co-pilot with their feet on the dashboard, pulling up on a thing, trying to get that kite up in the air, and finally it just went down. And of course a B-24, when it hits the water, just splatters. And the guys, all the guys in the back were killed. And I had the position that you're supposed to take on when you're shot down over water is to the radio operator sits down, and then the engineer sits in his lap. And so when we hit there's a little protrusion that they had forgotten, and didn't ever notice before, but it stuck out the back, and that managed to tear off all the vertebrates, from 1 to 6 vertebrates in my back, and which for a long time, it just, I could never stand up straight. His head came back and broke my shoulder. His hip came back and broke my knee. And so now I'm trying to save myself. And finally I just give up, and I looked up at the sky, and here in this greenish haze, I can see that there's light. Oh, I thought, my goodness, if there's light, I can get there. So I took a breath of this bubbles, and then I started to head for that light, paddling as hard as I could with one hand, because this thing just hung down. And as I just got to the top, and I shot out of the water, and I couldn't pull the Mae West. The Mae West would have been a real lifesaver, but I couldn't. I was too busy paddling to take time off to pull the valve, and so I wound up paddling, and the waves were 10 to 15 feet high, so it was very difficult. So luckily, the navigator, Ole Olsen, who incidentally had lost a leg in this thing, grabbed a hold of my epaulet and held me, but he couldn't get me in the dinghy because I couldn't help him, and trying to get up there with one leg and one arm, it was impossible. So he held me outside of the dinghy for the next hour, and that was, and you can imagine, my back would hurt me every time a wave would come along and slap us down. We'd follow the wave up and then come down, and it was a jarring experience. And with my injuries, it was even more difficult. we went to, we continued there, and then we put our markers out, and P-38 was flying over us, and then he left us, and a P-51 came and stayed there for a long, long time. And somehow or another they summoned a British destroyer who was off course, and that destroyer came in, and after a lot of talking, we had to convince them that we were Americans, not German. So the best way they did that is a stream of profanity. And they put these. The rest of the guys were able to climb up on a Jacob's ladder, a rope ladder, but I couldn't do it, obviously. So they sent a hook down and a guy to put in my belt, my pants, and of course that just about killed me. So I told him, no, you damn string of profanity like that. And then I told him that I couldn't stand the pain. So they, a seaman, jumped over the side, and that was quite a sight to see. He grabbed me under the armpits, and then using one arm, he went up that Jacob's ladder.
How many were left in the water if you had lost so many in the aft part of the airplane?
There was four, a pilot and a co-pilot, and the navigator and myself.
So the bomb bay doors caved in as normal. Did the airplane
It broke right behind
It broke behind.
the wing, yeah.
B-24 was famous for that.
It was famous for that. But this guy got us, and I asked him for booze when I got on board, shaking like a dog crapping peach stones, you know. And he wouldn't give me any, and that angered me. And another bunch of profanity. And finally, he gave me something to drink, but of course, I was in terrible shape. And when I got off of I can't recall how I ever got off of the destroyer, but then I went down to a small boat. Then this boat goes up against the shore, took us into shore at Dover. And Dover, the white cliffs that you've heard talk about, is a limestone. And the limestone, they mine limestone there. And they had donkey carts that would carry the limestone, and then it was hooked to a winch up on top of this cliff, and they winch this up there. Well, instead of limestone, they put Jim Garvey in that donkey cart, and that you might know that the stretcher just fit just perfectly in there, and took me up to the top of the cliff. And at the cliff, you may be interested, there was a hospital. Guys were coming back off of D-Day, see, still infantrymen. And this hospital was had 10 feet of canvas along outside, and the rest was poles, and it occupied the space of a city block, I would guess. And they had dozens of physicians and hundreds of nurses in this thing, running around, scurrying around. And so they put me in there, and that was kind of a holding place. They're trying to administer to your needs, but at the same time, it was they hold you until they found room at a hospital for you. Well, in the middle of the night, Jerry started dropping buzz bombs, and the buzz bombs were the rocket bombs of the day, and these bombs were exploding pretty close to us. So they loaded us in trucks, and then the trucks took us out to the nearest airfield, and they piled us into airplanes. Didn't make any difference what kind of an airplane. They made it a transport plane that night, and I happened to get into a Mosquito, which is a much acclaimed medium bomber. It's the interior, they call it wicker. It was wood, and it was lace. Very interesting. So they got me to Oxford General Hospital in Oxford, England. It was a hospital which was subsidized in peacetime by the doctors of the United States. What's their name? Anyway, the Medical Association. And so I was there, and I was totally incapacitated, and but I felt pretty good, and I learned how to play chess, and I did a lot of things for the short time I was there. We were supposed to be immediately transferred to the States. Well, that didn't happen, and so finally I called I told the ward boy to go run to get me the commanding officer. So he came in there, and he was a big burly naval commander, and I said, I've been here for quite a while, and I said, as apparent that I'm going to be here for quite a while, I heard so much about Oxford University. I'd like to go to see Oxford University. And he says, he said, I've been here for 3 years, and you're the first GI that's even evinced an interest in Oxford University. He said, I'll see what I can do. So he went out of the door, and about 3 days later he came in, and he said, Mr. Garvey, he said, or Sergeant Garvey, he said, I have good news for you. You're enrolled at the Oxford University Magdalen College. Academic pursuits didn't last very long, about 3 months. But these young British students were so glad to take care of me. They fought each other to man the gurney, and I don't know any of their names anymore. I should have kept names and watched for them, because obviously they would probably be important people in British Isles later on in life. Okay, I should tell you about my first time I was shot down, and I really wasn't shot down. I was shot up. I tell everybody I was shot down. In truth, I wasn't. We were on a mission, and it wasn't much of a mission. And we had, if anybody had any problems, they were supposed to go out of the formation to the right. Well, we were way over on the left. There was no way. So we went like this, and no sooner did we do that than we began to get flack from our own people underneath us, because only the Germans would know that. And there's a lot of German flying our airplanes that were grounded, you know, that they ran out of gas over Germany, and they'd fix up these B-24s, and they would ride alongside of them and shoot the crap out of us, you know. So that was the reason why you couldn't make the left turn. So anyway, we bailed out. The engine started to shake so bad that we couldn't feather it like we tried to. Couldn't feather that propeller. In other words, straighten the propeller out so that it would have air resistance. So the pilot decided we should all get out, whereupon we did. And I landed on the shore. Now, I'm the first guy out, and I go out when it is possible to land on dry land. I'm not going to land in the middle of the channel. So I landed right on the shore and I can tell you the temperature aloft and everything about that day, because it's imprinted on my mind. The temperature on the ground was 68 degrees that day. Aloft, it reached a temperature of about 12 below. At the height that we bailed out, it was about 39. And I would guess that we went out at about 15,000 feet. And that was quite an excursion, trying to pilot that thing and getting caught up in a wind, and then looking down, and there's a bunch of churches with these lightning rods, and you can imagine yourself getting skewered on one of those. And then the alternative was a bunch of cows grazing in between there. Now, the next thing is, should I land on the back of a cow, and how badly could I get hurt? Well, I landed amongst the cows. They didn't even notice. They just kept on grazing. That was my first time I got shot down. And that
what happened to that airplane?
That airplane, oh, thank you. That airplane went into the Midlands, Surrey, buried into the ground, and strangely enough, they didn't find it for, just recently. And Lubino got a letter from this fella that had told about that airplane, and could they find out any information, because there was so anyway, I wrote to them and I said I was on that plane, and so he wrote a story that that told about my bailing out, and they dug that airplane up, and the bombs were still in it, and it's a very interesting story, and it made the headlines of their paper, and I've got a copy of it here that I'd like to show you, and we maintained a correspondence for some time with this reporter. Very interesting relationship.
you came out of that without any injury.
Yes, that went to the. We obviously we were all scattered all over, depending on what time you got out of the airplane. Some guys got out later than others, so they went down far, got a longer ways away from the coast. But anyway, that we got the word. We were all supposed to come back to Lord Haw Haw's castle. As you probably know, he was a very well-known British guy that got picked up by the Germans, and he was a spy. So he left his castle and went to Germany, where he spent the war as a spy for. And he would tell you the time that Westminster clock was. You know, they really were on the ball, those German spies. But one episode in London, we got carried away with our fun, and we decided that we should, finally my buddy and I, that we should steal a British taxi cab, a London taxi cab, which we did with the obvious idea of finding girls. Well, we picked these girls up and assumed they were going to be with us all day and maybe later, and they got terrorized inside of that cab, probably due to our erratic driving. We hadn't driven a long time, and driving in downtown London is something unusual in the best of times. So anyway, so the girls were terrorized, and they would get out as fast as they could. And we left the taxi cab, and we never heard any more about it. So that's one we got away with.
I'm looking at a few photos that you have brought along. There's one here with a couple of dogs. Is there some significance
Well,
to that?
we were very interested in this gentleman was walking these dogs, and it was black and white, and of course, in black and white Scotch is well known, and so I had to get down. I petted him, and I thought it was so interesting. We had a Scotty in our family, and so I had to take that picture and send it home to my mother.
And that's what I see that they are Scotties.
Yeah.
There's another one here where you're in this automobile.
That's the taxi cab that we stole.
And I see another one here where you're receiving some award. Maybe you can tell us about any commendations or recognitions you received.
I got the Air Medal, and I think I had 3 oak leaf clusters. An oak leaf cluster is like another air mail. So that was for 20 missions.
And then there's a picture here of a very attractive lady that was dressed in a nurse uniform. Maybe you can tell us who that is.
She is my, today, well, at that time she was my girlfriend. And it's a romance that went from 1939 until 1945. In 1939 I met her, took her home immediately to my mother, our family, because I thought that this was quite a gal. I had to get closer to her, and so she went away to nurses training, and I saw her only once in the 3 years she was in nurses training, and then I went overseas without seeing her, and so now we've got. well, about 6 years involved in this. And I come back and here she is waiting for me. And but she planned to come to London. And we had all kinds of plans that we were going to do and stay in the British Isles, and at least until the war was over. But the German Luftwaffe had other ideas.
Now, you refer to meeting her in London. How is it that she's in London, or?
Well, she was going to come there and going into nursing, and preferably in London. But she was sent over the pond. She wound up in the Battle of the Bulge.
So she was in the military also.
So she wound up in the military.
And she was in the nurse
Army
corps?
Nurses Corps. Yeah.
Army Nurses Corps.
Yeah.
And she served with what group?
Army Nurses Corps. I can't. She was with Patton's group when he went across Europe, and that they leapfrogged. One MASH unit would leapfrog with another, and keep up with it, and they would do meatball surgery on the wounded. So she said it was her duty to clean up after Patton.
While you were in the military, did you ever have an opportunity to see any USO shows?
Yes, but not the big headliners. We saw small groups right out in the desert down in Sahara Desert. I saw one, which was a group a traveling group, and they went around. That was another thing I failed to mention. We flew down there just for one purpose, and that was the Ploesti oil field. And I never got on the Ploesti oil fields because I got a problem with aerotitis, and so I wound up I was grounded that day, and so I didn't go along.
When were you discharged?
September of 40. 44.
44? 45. September 44. And what was your rank at that time?
Tech sergeant.
Have you had any follow-up military experiences?
No. I was in a great big hurry to get home. And that girlfriend, who would later become my wife, and the mother of my six children. And she's still with me today, 62 years we've been together. And when you put the 6 years in front of it, 68 years that we have conducted this relationship.
Have you attended any military reunions?
Yes, I did. The most memorable was at the Air Force Academy, and Brigadier General Johnson and I played golf with him. It was in his foursome on the academy grounds.
Do you maintain contact with any of the fellows you were in?
One guy was on my crew, Bud Wells. He was an engineer for United States Steel for many years and is retired. And he still works for U.S. Steel. But his wife and I have a unique relationship. We're email each other. And so whenever I want to contact Bud, I do it by by email with his wife. But we write letters to each other. He's just a good friend.
Do you, by any chance, remember your serial number?
Yes, 3727-2533.
After your military, what type of work were you in, Jim?
I was involved in I was zone manager, Jones sales manager for Procter & Gamble Company. I traveled from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to the state of Montana and Wyoming. So I had a big territory. Loved it. I always said when I got through with my Air Corps duties, I had an opportunity to go home on an airplane. I said, I'm never going to fly those things anymore. I had all I want of them. And so the first thing I know, I'm my new job, and they said, here's your territory now. And I said, how am I going to drive that? You're not going to drive it. We got a car, and every year we're going to get you a new car, but you're not going to get many miles. You're going to fly it all. Fly. And I, from then on, I was aboard that airplane. Many airplanes.
Do you have any additional comments or experiences that you'd like to share with us?
I have. I was president of AARP, state AARP, and I enjoyed that experience. Raised 6 kids, and they're 6 very civic-minded people, and they're very successful in almost every way, and they've made quite a contribution to their various communities.
Name them and tell us where they are.
My oldest son is Keith, and all of them names start with K. So Keith was retired from Apple, where he was senior engineer. He's building his dream home in the mountains of Oregon right now, and he on his private time, he used to help out with score with the Boy Scouts, and he became very good. And next thing you know, both he and his wife got involved in teaching Boy Scout executives and in various subjects, and they traveled and they love the outdoors, and as I said before, they have their dream home now. My second one, my prize daughter, her name is Kay, and she is president of Techwear Incorporated, and they manufacture garments which get rid of electricity. And she has 3 patents, which I have taught her, and I taught her. I go to California to see her, and she meets me and my wife at the airport in a limousine, and she puts my wife up in the front seat of the limousine and puts me and her in the back seat, and all we do is talk the business all the way into town. She is a millionaire, of course, and she is very, very successful. Next one is son Kevin, and he is right now employed as an electronic guru with a casino. He's bounced around with various jobs, but he's quite an electronic expert. Next one is daughter Carrie, and Carrie just retired from Quest, and she plays bridge, and she goes all over the Midwest entering bridge tournaments. And to be a master, to have 5 master points is quite a lifelong ambition. And so I asked her how many master points she had. You have to win a tournament in order to get master points. And I asked her how many. She said, Dad, I don't know, but it says, let's start out with 1,200. So she's having a great time, doing just exactly what she wants. And she lives in Oxbow. The next is a son, and he teaches school in Indianapolis. Loves the job. Just got through with raising a boy who was totally unable to do anything. Couldn't even roll over on the floor, and he raised him from age 2 to 18. Now he's in a foster home, this child.
And the son's name was?
Kim, K-I-M. And the last one is Candace, and she is the assistant to her sister. She runs the warehouse. She's in charge of all storage, all the warehousing and the shipping for this company. That takes care of my children. When was the tornado? 57.
57.
June 20th, 1957. Right around that time, I installed a bank in my home, and that bank was for the children, and they had a graduated system of allowances. And the allowance was based on their age, and as they got older, they got more money. And then if they wanted to, from this bank, they could deposit this, and I had a pretty good interest program for the kids. So anyway, it was kind of the talk of the town, and so the Fargo Forum thought it was so interesting, and they came down, they shot all kinds of pictures of it, and it wound up as a full-page article in the Forum for I think June of 57.
Well, Jim, we thank you for the most interesting interview.
My pleasure.
And we want to thank you for all your endeavors and also service to your country.
Okay.